Okay, so for part C, we're looking at advising Arnold whether the proposed transaction is worthwhile. So what they mean by worthwhile is he making a profit? Is he making a profit from this transaction? Well, what's the transaction? They're telling us that Arnold owns 5,000 shares in Churchill PLC. Okay, so he owns 5,000. His friend's telling him, look, sell these shares and borrow 6,000 from the bank at a rate of 8%. So borrow this from the bank and use that money use all that money that you have to buy shares in Grantham. So he owns 5,000 shares in Churchill PLC. So he owns 5,000 shares in Churchill. And if he wants to sell them, he can sell them at market value, market price. So he owns them in Churchill and 5,000 shares, well, market price is £1. So if he's going to sell them, he's going to sell 5,000 shares at £1. So 5,000 shares at the market price, which is £1. So that means he's going to make £5,000, but he's also going to borrow 6,000 from the bank. So he's going to borrow 6,000 from the bank. That means his total finance available is £11,000. And his friend's telling him, look, use all of the 11,000 and buy shares in Grantham because it's a good idea. So, okay, so Grantham, well, Grantham's share price, to buy from Grantham, you're going to need, it's £1.20 per share for Grantham. So if he has 11,000 available finance, but how many shares can he buy? Well, we know that one share equals £1.20. So he has 11,000 available finance divided by £1.20, which is one share, means he can buy 9,166 shares. So 9,166 shares. And if we want to know, well, is it worthwhile? So first we need to know how much dividends can he make on this. So we want to know how much what's the dividends per share for Grantham? How much dividends will he make on these 9,166 shares? Well, the dividends per share we know equals earnings minus debt, if there is debt, divided by number of shares. So for Grantham, the earnings are 120,000, both companies is 120,000, but there's no debt, so it's complete equity finance divided by number of shares. So Grantham has 800,000 ordinary shares. So 120,000 divided by 800,000 ordinary shares equals 120,000 divided by 800,000 ordinary shares equals 0.15. So the dividends per share, he's going to make 15 pence per share. So 0.15 times by 9166 shares that he already bought. So he's making 15 pence per share and he's buying 9166 shares. So that means altogether he's making £1,374.90, all in dividends from the shares that he owns. So he's making £1,374.90. But we want to know, well, is it profitable? Is it a good idea? Is the transaction worthwhile? So if it's worthwhile, we need to take away the dividends he had when he had 5,000 shares. When he had 5,000 shares in Churchill, we want to know, well, what was the dividends he would have made on those 5,000 shares? And we've got to take that away because that's a cost foregone. So we let that cost go. So we want to know, right, so what was the dividends per share he would have made on those 5,000 that he had in Churchill? So dividends per share again earnings, so 120,000. This time Churchill did have debt. It was 600,000 at 8%. That was the debt. So take away the 600,000 at 8%. 600,000 times by 0.08 divided by number of shares. Number of shares, they had 500,000. Number of shares, 500,000. 500,000. So the dividends per share was 120,000 minus 600,000 times by 0.08. All of this divided by 500,000 equals 0.144. So 0.144. So his dividends, so he would have made 5,000 shares at 14.4 pence. So this is how much he would have had. He would have made 5,000 times by 0.144. So he would have made £720 from those 5,000 shares. So this is a cost. So this is the total money he made by buying all these shares. But he lost this. So this is one of his costs. And his second cost is the fact that he's borrowing 6,000 at a rate of 8%. So he has to pay the bank back 8% of the 6,000. So his second cost is 6,000 shares, 6,000 that he's borrowing from the bank at 8% equals, so 6,000 times by 0.08 times by 8% that he's got to pay back to the bank, £480. That's his second cost. Okay, so so the question is it worthwhile? So he made £1,374.90. He made that from all the shares that he bought. We'll take away the cost of the shares that he lost, that he forgone, the dividends that he would have made on the shares that he had. Take away the cost of the bank from borrowing, the 6,008%, take that away. So 1374.90, take away the two costs, 720, 480, means that he made a profit of £174.90. That's his profit, £174.90. So the question is saying, advise Arnold as to whether the proposed transaction is worthwhile. And the answer is yes, it is worthwhile because he made a profit of £174.90. So we found out the number of shares that he could buy from Grantham. We saw the dividends. So he had 5,000 in Churchill. He sold them at £1. He made £5,000 from that. He borrowed 6,000 from the bank. So he has 11,000 available finance. 11,000. Grantham, one share on Grantham is £1.20. And his friend's telling him, look, get all the money that you have and buy from Grantham. So he's dividing 11,000 by £1.20, which is one share in Grantham, means that he gets 9,166 shares. We're looking at the dividends he'd make on these shares. So the dividends for Grantham was 15 pence per share. So this is the total money in dividends that he would make from Grantham. So he would make £1,374.90. But when he had 5,000 shares in Churchill, he was making dividends on that. So to sell it, it's a cost foregone. It's like an opportunity cost. That's a cost gone. So we work out the dividends that he would have made, 720, and because he's borrowing as well, we work out the cost of the borrowing. Those are these two costs, and we take away the total amount of dividends he made from the two costs. If it's a profit, it's worthwhile. Obviously, in this case, it is a profit, £174.90. So it is a good transaction. It's a worthwhile transaction. If he would have made a loss, if it was negative or he would have made a loss, then the transaction would have been not worthwhile, and then we would say it's not a good idea for him to do it. So yeah, that's it. It's not too difficult, actually. Okay, so now we're looking at question D. Question D is basically just saying calculate the price of the ordinary shares that would eliminate any arbitrage profits. So before our amount was 1,374 and we made profits. So we had this amount when he invested in Grantham and he made profits of £174.90. But this time they're telling you they don't want you to make any. So what would be the price of the share if he doesn't make any profit? So basically if the number of dividends multiplied by the dividends per share equals the exact same as the costs. And we already know that our costs were 720. So our cost was 720 plus 480. And 720, we got that from the 5,000 that we already had, 5,000 shares that we already had, the dividends we made on those shares, and 480 was the amount of borrowing he made from the bank. And now they want our share price, our number of shares multiplied by the dividends per share to equal 720 plus 480. So we make no profit whatsoever. They want us to make no profit whatsoever this time. And so we're looking at Grantham PLC. In Grantham PLC, we already know what the dividends per share is. So the only unknown here is our number of shares. So our dividends per share is still the same. So it's earnings. So the earnings are the same, 120,000 divided by number of shares, 800,000 equals 0.15. So dividends per share we know. So number of shares times by 0.15 equals 720 plus 480, the two costs, and they want us to make no profit, so it needs to equal the same amount as the cost. So we want to know what is the number of shares we have, so the dividends makes no profits, so our total amount of money made is no profit equals the costs, and they want us to know what is the market price. So we've got to work out the market price as well. So 720 plus 480 divided by 0.15, that's the amount of shares we can get. So our number of shares is going to be 720 plus 480 equals, divide that by 0.15 equals 8,000. So we can buy 8,000 shares in Grantham PLC. So if we buy 8,000 shares in Grantham PLC, okay, the dividends that we make from this is going to make sure we make no profit. The dividends is only going to cover our costs. So it's going to cover the 720 from the dividends from the 5,000 foregone in Churchill, and the cost of borrowing, the 480 that we borrowed. So that means 8,000 shares in Grantham So 8,000 shares in Grantham, the dividends will make zero profit. It will just amount to our losses. The dividends will equal zero profit. Okay, so we have 8,000 shares in Grantham. We have £11,000 available. Okay, so we had £11,000 from the 5,000 foregone when we sold, and we had 6,000 from borrowing. So we have £11,000, and we can buy 8,000 shares in Grantham. So if we can buy 8,000 shares in Grantham, they want us to work out, assuming that you make no profit, they want to work out calculate the price of the ordinary share. So calculate one price. So if we have £11,000 and we're dividing this by 8,000 shares, that's going to make us zero profit. This is going to tell us the market price. This is going to tell us the price of the shares that we'll be paying. So 11,000 divided by 8,000 equals £1, 1.375, and that would be price per share. So that's basically all that's asking. So £1, 1.375 is the price per share. So what they're saying is basically, so they don't want us to make any profit. So before, when we worked out the number of shares that we could buy, and the dividends per shares we could buy, and the dividends per share they gave us, and we made a profit. So when we got rid of our costs, we made a profit of 174. But this time they don't want us to make a profit. They want us to basically just cover the costs, make zero profit. So we know what the dividends per share is already. We want to know the number of shares and the dividends. So 5,000 shares or whatever, however many shares, and the dividends, that's the amount of money you're making. That basically equals the amount of money you would make from the transaction. So your number of shares, we already know dividends per share of Grantham, 0.15. That's easy to work out. So the number of shares, if you do 720 plus 480 divided by 0.15, it's going to equal 8,000 shares. And that's the amount of shares that we can buy. But we've got 11,000 available. So if we have £11,000 from the 5,000 plus the 6,000 borrowing, and we can buy 8,000 shares in Grantham to make zero profit from the dividends, that means that market price per share, 11,000 divided by 8,000, is going to be £1.375. And that's going to increase from what it used to be. The market price used to be £1.20, and now the market price is £1.375. So it's increased. And that's basically all D is asking. Assume all other prices remain the same to make no profit. Calculate the price of the new share. That's literally it. Just calculate the new price of the ordinary shares. That would eliminate any profits. It's kind of worded a bit hard, but yeah, you just practice makes perfect, really. If you just keep practicing, it should be okay. And this last bit here is really easy. So we already worked out the new market price, and they're telling us, okay, so you've got your new market price. With the new market price that you found out, work out what the weighted average cost of capital, calculate the cost of equity and the weighted average cost of capital for Grantham, for what Grantham would be. And we know Grantham has no debt. So because Grantham has no debt, cost of equity equals weighted average cost of capital. So they both equal the same amount. And the only thing that's changed, so this is question E. So this is the last bit. So this is question E. And we already know cost of equity equals dividends per share divided by the market price per share. And if there's no debt, we know that if there's no debt, cost of equity equals weighted average cost of capital. Okay. So for Grantham, Grantham's the only one that's had changes. So our cost of equity equals dividends per share, still the same. Dividends per share, still the same. 120,000 earnings divided by number of shares, 800,000. It doesn't have any debt. There's no changes or anything in terms. So the dividends per share is still the same, 0.15. But the only thing that's changed is the fact that we worked out the new market price. So because we worked out the new market price, and we know that cost of equity equals dividends per share divided by market price per share. And before, our market price per share used to be 1.2. So that's why we'll have different cost of equity and a different WACC than we did before. Before, the market price was £1.20 because they gave us that in the question, £1.20. But this time we made our changes. Okay, we made our changes to make sure that we don't make any profits from our dividends. So we found that our new market price will be £1.375. So we know that dividends per share is 0.15. The new market price is 1.375. So our cost of equity equals 0.15 divided by 1.375 equals 0.109. Cost of equity equals 0.109. So our cost of equity equals 10.9%. And because there's no debt, because this company has no debt, weighted average cost of capital also equals 10.9%. So that's that. And so this is Grantham. So for Churchill, it's still the exact same amount. So the weighted average cost of capital for Churchill is what we worked out before. So that hasn't had any changes. We haven't focused on that. And what that weighted average cost of capital is 10.9%. So you're basically saying that the weighted average cost of capital has come up to 10.9%. So all the changes have come to Grantham, and now Grantham has dropped to 10.9%, the same as what Churchill used to be. So they're both the same, basically. The weighted average cost of capital is now above 10.9%. So it's pretty easy. It's just it's a 3-minute question. But the rest are kind of hard. You just got to work through it. But the good thing is question 2 pretty much is the same as question 1 in most respects. So if you practice this, hopefully in the exam they'll give you a similar question and you just have to do the same things. So yeah, cost of equity, weighted average cost of capital, both are the same. And the only thing that's changed is the market price per share. Dividends per share is easy. We already know what it is. We know how to work it out. And that's how you get the answer.